I work as a security guard for a company that takes jobs no one else will. Part 2. So, a lot of you were asking to hear more about my job and the duties that come along with it. I'll be sharing in this post more about the stories I have and what I heard from the other guards. I know you particularly wanted to know about the woman in Building 6, so I'll be sharing my experience with that first. This happened about a year ago, but I still dread going back to the building every time during my patrol. I was doing a sweep of the building, using my flashlight to illuminate my path. I was done checking one of the offices, and as I turned around, my heart nearly popped out of my chest at what the beam of my flashlight landed on. It was a woman in her late 20s, with unkempt hair and raggedy clothes. She was just standing there, staring at me, not even flinching at the light in her face. I was about to talk to her, thinking she was a squatter, completely forgetting about the rules since I had never once encountered her by then. And then when I remembered the rules, that I was supposed to ignore her, my heart started to thump fast. I lowered my flashlight to my waist, pretending I was looking at something on the wall to prevent her from seeing my beam bouncing up and down from my trembling hands. I remembered that I had to do a full sweep before leaving if she was here, and I was only done with one floor. So at the thought of this, I cursed in my mind. "Hey, I'm sorry. I think I fell asleep in one of the offices and stayed after closing," she said. But I ignored her. I pretended to look around some more, but knew I could only do it for so long before she got suspicious. So I decided to test my luck and just went for the door. As soon as I was inches close to her, she just stepped aside and let me move along. I strode to the next office, but heard her following me right behind. "Hey, can you please let me out? My children must be worried sick," she repeated. The next 15 minutes or so, she was breathing down my neck, constantly trying to grab my attention. As I entered one of the offices, she pointed to the corner opposite of where my beam was and said, "Hey, who's that over there?" I fought the urge to look there, knowing she was lying, but half scared that someone would just jump me right around the corner. As I progressed with my sweep, she became increasingly irritated, throwing stuff in my direction, not at me, mind you, but trying to startle me by throwing them in front of my face, etc. Suddenly jumping in my walking path with a loud scream, before moving aside again, clasping her hands over her mouth and pointing behind me with wide eyes, which screamed utter fear. Even saying things like, "I know you can see me. I know you know I'm here. I can see how scared you are." I ignored all her provocations as much as I could, and by the time I was back on the first floor, more than ready to get out, she was saying things like, "Are you sure you checked all the rooms?" giggling along the way. I put the key in the keyhole and everything went quiet. I didn't wait to see if she was gone, but instead just went out as calmly as I could and locked the door behind me. I couldn't sleep for a few weeks after that. A few months ago, I was stationed at an office building. At first, it seemed like a common job, but I knew there was a catch before I even signed up. Sure enough, I was right. My partner and I were stationed on floor 43, which was undergoing renovations. Our job was to simply stand in front of a door. The door had a card reader and we were given access, but were strictly forbidden from entering. People in hazmat suits would be coming in and out all day long from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. We were to let them in and out as they pleased, keeping track of the number of people who came and went. Now, the catch was, after 4 p.m., we were ordered not to let anyone in or out. That meant even if someone knocked on the door at 4:01, we were to ignore them entirely. There would always be at least 3 people who'd try to leave the room after 4 o'clock, always asking politely and then becoming increasingly desperate, saying they simply lost track of time and pleading with us, saying that their family was waiting for them at home. We always ignored their crying and pleading, no matter how desperate it was, until it turned into whimpers and then finally stopped. Now, I've only seen the room from the door, and from what I could see, it was just a normal room undergoing renovation like the rest of the floor. So whatever was in there must have been deeper inside or hidden in plain sight. As for the numbers we tracked, The number of people who got out by the end of the day was always lower than the number of people who went in. One story a guard named Chris told me was about his time in an old mansion guarding a big mirror. He and his coworker were in the security room patrolling every hour, especially making sure that the mirror was covered with the sheet. They were to, under no circumstances, look at the mirror. They had a camera feed of the mirror, which was on the bottom floor under the stairs, but it was turned so that the reflective side faced away from the camera. This one night, Chris's coworker goes for a patrol, and as he enters the mirror room, suddenly the sheet just slides off. Now, the guy who told me this said it was technically impossible for the sheet to just come off because it was fastened tightly, but somehow it did, and his partner just finds himself staring at the mirror. Chris locks the security room, as per the instructions from HQ, and calls the intervention team. Meanwhile, he glances back at the camera feed, only to find his coworker still staring blankly in the mirror. He thought the camera was frozen, but the timer was moving, so his partner was just very still. He tried radioing him, but there was no response. After about a minute or so, all of a sudden his partner pulls out his gun, puts it in his mouth, and blows his brains out. Chris was transferred the next day since a special team was sent to secure the mirror and his services were no longer needed. Part 2 was a bit longer than what TikTok allows, so stay tuned for Part 2 of Part 2.